Hey people, and today I'm going to share with you arguably one of the most important things that you should know about Hearthstone Battlegrounds, and that is direction, or essentially what every tribe needs in order to succeed. If you find these cards, they will allow you to pivot or transition into that build or scale. So these are basically the cards that you look for every single game and that decide what your board ends up looking like. Again, these are questions that I get very often, which is the reason I'm making this video. This is kind of like my mid-game guide, which I made a while ago, where I talk about direction, so what cards you're looking to triple into. But it got kind of outdated with the entire minion refresh and with new direction and new cards being added. So this is kind of an updated version. So sit back, take some notes, and enjoy the video. Starting off with beasts, now the first thing I want to mention is Leapfrogger. It used to be some sort of direction, but not anymore. Ever since Leapfrogger was nerfed and the meta is shifting, the card is not really viable anymore. There are still like super high roll Leapfrogger boards, but they need a lot of pieces to work and a lot of luck. So I wouldn't say if you find Leapfrogger that you're beast, so don't get too baited by this card. Same with Bird Buddy. It's good tempo, but don't confuse early tempo cards with direction. That's the main beginner mistake, that people find early tools for a build and they stick with it and then die because they don't find the main scaling or direction. So don't get baited by early tempo cards that kind of push you towards a build, but like it's fine to lean towards something, but that doesn't justify fully committing onto it. I would say that for Beast, the first main key card is Mama Bear. It is such a good tempo card. Like, you find this in every Beast, just puts insane stats onto the board. If you have a Mama Bear, it's pretty safe to stick with Beasts. Crocolisk is in a weird spot. It could be used for some good tempo early on, since it puts great stats on your board for Beasts with Avenge. But again, if you find Crocolisk alone and you never find the Mama Bear or the Goldwyn, which we'll talk about in a second, then you still don't really have an end game plan. The Crocolisk is nice. It's a nudge into Beasts, but you need a little bit more. So I think Crocolisk is like on the edge of just being good enough to be called direction, but not quite as good as Mama Bear, if that makes sense. Then we have tier 6, where Goldwyn is probably the best example of direction for Beast. You hit a Goldwyn and you can just try and go with a Macaw Baron build. So as soon as you have Goldwyn, then you're looking for Macaw and Baron. So Macaw and Baron are in direction enough. One other thing is that people try and look for pieces after they have the direction, but too early. So as an example, people try and pick up Barons and Macaws without having the Goldwyn first, and then you die if you don't find the Goldwyn. So I would say look for a Goldwyn and then you can find the extra pieces. There's other examples with other builds as well that I will give, but don't buy the furniture before you have the house. That is a good analogy. And that's about it. Mechs isn't really direction, it's just a good poison card. Same with the Reborn card on tier 5. So generally speaking, these are the main cards. You will notice that direction is mainly key pieces that scale. These are units that help you advance the board and just raise the stats in general of your units. Now we will move on to demons. So for demons, Referee on tier 1 is still direction, meaning if you hit a Weaver on 1, you can just cycle demons and try and stick with demons, because all the more demons you play, the stronger you'll get, and it's scaling already. The only issue is that if you never find the follow-up later on, you will still die, but most likely you will get a top 4 because of your big Weaver. So Ref Weaver, also kind of like Crocolisk, is on the edge of being direction enough. Like, it could be just used as early tempo. It's completely fine to just have a Weaver for some stats early on and then sell it and transition into something else if you find better direction. But it's like a good push into demons that if you find a follow-up, you can just fully lean into it. Juggler on tier 3, I wouldn't call it direction. It's more of a tempo unit on the board. If you play it with a couple demons, you'll be strong, snipe some cards on your opponent's board, and just win a couple fights. Don't try and go full jugglers, I would say. Katranatier, same deal. It's more of a tempo card. It's not because you have an early Katranatier that you're gonna go demons. Infernal is like on the edge as well. It's a good push towards demons, but it's not justified as direction enough because it scales very slowly on its own. It's a cool piece to have on your board if you're going demons, but it's not going to allow you to full pivot into demons. And then we have Impatient Doomsayer, and this card is probably going to be enough. If you find an early or triple into an early Impatient Doomsayer, it's going to generate you so many triples, and then those triples could either lead into a different build if you triple into a good card like a Mama Bear that you could go into Beast, or you can just use all the demons that you generate to just go demons. If you have Ref Weaver and Big Fernal already, this is going to help you scale those up and maybe find other pieces on tier 5 and 6 to pursue this build. So Impatient Doomsayer Amazing card. It's also just a lot of gold and value. Now on tier 5, this is like the first real direction for demons, and that is Insatiable Urzul. I hope I pronounced that correctly. The taunt that gets scaled up after you play demons. Because it's scaling. You have this and finally you get more out of your cycling demons. So instead of just Weaver getting buffed and maybe Big Fernal, you now have a taunt that actually scales a lot more. So now you see synergies on your demon board that you actually start putting like real good stats on your board. Now a single Urzul is not going to be enough, so you want like a pair on this, or you want to have some engine like the Impatient Doomsayer to keep providing more demons, or you will want your 6-drop the Firebat that just scales up your demons as well passively. So Firebat on tier 6 also good direction to just go demons and have your board upgrade pretty much on its own. That is about it. Imp Mama can't really be called direction, it's just a tempo card, and that's it. Now also don't confuse tech cards with direction. Meaning like very often a demon build wants to end in the late game with a ghoul to like get rid of divine shields because divine shields counter it super hard, or a selfless because you want divine shields on your demons, but that's not direction. That's just like add-ons late game to upgrade your board or your build against specific opponents. So they are kind of necessary in those builds, but they're not enabling the builds. When we look at dragons, Whelp Smuggler was for a while a good direction card because it was so broken. Like the plus health that it gave on your dragons was amazing, so you could just hard force it. Right now Whelp Smuggler kind of sucks. Don't get baited by it once again. And mid-game dragons are in a weird spot. Like on its own, Taragosa isn't direction enough and Promo Drake isn't direction enough, but together, yes. So if you find both cards, it's direction enough. So very often what happens is you can just take some Taragosas on the board, and then if you don't find follow-ups, sell them or transition into something else. But if you do happen to roll the Promo Drake, then those combined can be seen as enough tools to scale up your board and just pursue dragons. I'm not quite sure if Prestus can be seen as direction. Probably not, but it allows your dragon board to get really strong counter mechs and for you to probably stick with it and hard look for the actual direction while not dying. Tier 5, Razorgore. Not really direction. It's a good card if you have a full board of dragons, but it's not that you triple into this card and you're suddenly like, yep, I'm gonna go dragons, because with just Razorgore on your board, you're still gonna lose very early on. It's once again like an add-on, a good tool if you already have a dragon setup, but it's not something that enables dragons to snowball. Main direction for dragons will still be tier 6, Nadina. You just give a shield to your entire board, so that's kind of broken. Nadina probably the best thing you can find. And Caligos, now a bit slower. It used to be one of the best cards in the game, but with how much scaling and tempo there is on lower tiers, Caligos fell off. Although it could still be seen as good enough direction for dragons, because obviously it is going to be the main like buffer, consistent buffs that you can put out on your board, even though you have to commit a lot of gold. For elementals, this is also in kind of a weird spot. If you hit super early Molten Rock and Body Elemental together, it's kind of like the Taragosa Promo Drake, you need both. So if you have just Body Elemental, you're probably not elementals yet, same with Molten Rock, but if you find both super early on, you can lean into it. I don't think it's direction enough yet, but you can lean into it, meaning you can just buy random elementals and you'll be rather strong because of your board. And eventually, because you keep on buying elementals, you'll find tools, triples, and be able to pursue it. Tier 4 Major Domo is actually an insane card. It could be seen as early tempo or just something that you play for a couple turns, but I've won games just purely using Major Domo, and I've seen other people do well with it as well because of how fast the meta is. If you have like double Domo and a Cyclone in front, you can just buff it up, cycling a bunch of elementals. There's a lot of synergies. With the Recycling Wraith on tier 4, with heroes like Millhouse getting a lot of gold and Gallywakes, so Major Domo, great card. I think if you hit it, you heavily lean into elementals, but you might not want to full commit yet because there's still better traction and better scaling to find that is more consistent. Light Spawn, kind of same deal. If you hit it super early, you can just go with elementals, but you need some more Hyrule after that. Just a single early Dazzling Light Spawn is not going to win you the game. You need to find 2 of them, or maybe a Nomi later on. You need to not die because it is kind of slow, but definitely a card worth considering most of the time. Tier 5, we obviously have Nomi, a good scaling card for elementals if you hit it early. Once again, with elementals, you need to hit a lot of this stuff early, because the later it gets, the slower the scaling gets. That's what most scaling with most direction in the game. I feel like it's especially the case with Nomi and Dazzling Light Spawn because it scales units in the shop instead of on the board, meaning you need to still like transition those stats a turn later onto stats that are actually on your board and doing the battles. Master of Realities, another amazing card, but it is again in combination with Major Domo or with Party Elemental and Molten Rock. That's how it scales up. On its own, it doesn't do shit. It doesn't work with Dazzling Lightspawn or Nomi, so it is a card that is amazing direction if you already have one of those other elemental pieces on your board. If I have done one triple into Master Realities, I usually stick with elementals for the rest of the game, so I would call it really good direction. Then last but not least, tier 6, we have Genie. Genie is a card that is tripled into either for some money or for some tempo or value, and then you just go into something else. Or, well, it could be direction depending on what it drops. If it drops you a Lil Reg, if you're already tier 6, if it drops you like other pairs or triples, it could turn into a direction. It doesn't start off as direction, Genie, but it could prove itself worthy of direction because it helps you scale up your board with the tools that it can provide. Lil Reg as well used to be amazing. Right now, because it's again tier 6 scaling like Kaligos, it's rather slow. There's like literally scaling better on tier 4 and 5 for elementals. If you power level to tier 6 and you find like double Lil Reg, then I would still take it. I would still go elementals because it is consistent good scaling for your elemental board. Now Mechs, they're also in a really interesting spot when it comes to direction because of how many different ways you can go with a mech build. First of all, tier 3 you have Deflectabot. Usually this card, like, it's absolutely broken. I don't know why it got buffed, but if you find a Deflectabot, you just buy it, and very often it stays on your board. It's too strong to sell, it's easy to buff, it just gets multiple resets if you find other mechs, and you want to pick up other mechs because they're strong anyway. Most death rattle mechs or mechs that function as a reset for Deflector are good. Think of like menaces, you can put it on literally any mech. Think of Ag, which summons an 8/8, which is great tempo on tier 4. Like, generally speaking, the Deflector is just insanely good. So if you find it, you probably lean towards mechs, but it's okay to still transition out of it, of course. Tier 4, Greasebot. This card is bonkers. If you have some Divine Shields, just take Greasebot and it's already going to scale up your board, sometimes even more than Lightfang would. It's kind of like a better Lightfang in some ways. So this card, again, I would have nerfed it a while ago. Take it. It doesn't mean that you're necessarily hardcore gonna go max, but if you have a decent shop with it or are leaning into or towards max, this is gonna allow you to full just go for it. So as you'll notice, there's also two kinds of direction. The direction that you hit and you just go full into it, like Mama Bear. You hit a Mama Bear and you can just buy beast and go full beast. And then there's cards that need you to already like small lean into something, and then this enables it. Like Master Realities, you need to find some of the elemental scaling on tier 4 first, or Greasebot, you need to have some Divine Shields already first. So that's why it's good to set up your board for something and then see what you get offered. Either you find different direction to a full pivot, or you find something that helps you with what you've been leaning into. I hope all of that makes sense. I'm trying not to complicate it too much. We also have Mechanotank. I don't know if this can be called direction, but it is an insane card. It does really well right now. I would not be surprised to see it nerfed sometime soon. You can build Mechanotank compositions like with a bunch of Reborn and Death Rattles. It doesn't win lobbies, but it's gonna get you your top 3 very often. So you could have this on the board for a while, but if I would call it direction, probably not. Tier 5 Mackerel, again, is an amazing card if you already have a little bit of a setup. If you find it without setup at all, you could still take it and try and roll like a Deflectabot, and it's gonna be amazing, or a module and things like that. So it's something that's gonna help you pivot into Mechs properly, and it's an insane asset for Mechs. So if you're Mechs, you really want to find Mackerels. Kangors, it really depends on what kind of board you have, but generally speaking, this is not direction on its own, and it only works if you already have, of course, things that synergize with it. Main direction is also on tier 6 Omega Buster. It got nerfed, but it's still a great card. If you triple into Buster, you'll still put like great stats on your Mechs. It's still gonna be a good way to scale up your board if you don't have Greasebot necessarily. And then it works with Kangors and with Baron. So yeah, I would say you find a Buster, you can pivot into Mechs completely. Now onto Murlocs. Now Murlocs, I would say that the only direction they really have is Bran on tier 5, but it depends on your hero. Most Murloc boards don't succeed if they don't have a brand, except for maybe Flurgle because they can hard force it. But generally speaking, Murlocs is a bad tribe to go without having the double battle cries. Early honchos I don't think are direction enough. Like if you have double early honcho, you can still lean into Murlocs, play it for tempo, but generally speaking you don't stick with it unless you find the proper follow-up, which is Bran. Or a scam board. You can also just play Murlocs, but only to give your entire board poison. So if you face a lot of elementals or demons, they're vulnerable to poison because they just have big stats, meaning you just find SI7, another card that I wouldn't say it's direction enough. It's a good card if you just want poison on your board. So it's like the Toxfin of the old days, but a bit more flexible because you can have multiple Toxfins essentially on your Murlocs. And then you just find selfless heroes and just go scam. So it is a direction for scam, I guess, but I don't know if I can call scam a real comp. It's just like poison divine shields to cheese out opponents. That said, Seafood Slinger on 6 isn't really direction. It's like just a triple. Pirates, tier 3, Salty Looter isn't, again, direction enough. It's something that enables pirates to scale if you find the direction. So Salty Looter is more of a tempo unit, is something more that helps you lean towards pirates, but something that doesn't stay on the board if it doesn't get tripled or if you don't find the key pieces on tier 5 and 6. Key pieces being Hogger on tier 5, probably best direction. If you find this, you can just cycle pirates. You can do the famous APM pirate comp where you buy and sell pirates to just scale up your Salty Looters and the rest of your board with Peggy, which is borderline good enough as direction. I'm not sure. It depends again on your hero, what hero power you have. Depends on what your current board state looks like. Depends on what the lobby is going. But Peggy could be good enough to heavily lean towards pirates, because I've played pirate games without Hogger, just with like a golem Peggy. And you can scale up your board actually quite efficiently with that. So it's not find a Peggy, go pirates, but if you're leaning into pirates with like Salty Looters already, or you have some good pirates on the board, and then you find Peggy, that might be good enough to say, okay, fuck it, I'm gonna go pirates this game. You still want to try and find a Hogger, but I mean, it's do or die at that point. Tony is not really direction, it's something to just golden your direction that you already have. So Tony doesn't enable pirates, it just helps you if you already have pirates going for you. Eliza on tier 6, probably direction enough. If you find an Eliza, you want to find like Scallywag or more pirates to just instantly put insane stats on your board and murder people. You could go Scallywag comp, or you can just use it as a power spike if you already have like some sort of APM pirate stuff going. Just slapping an Eliza on that board is gonna instantly make you like twice as strong. Last but not least, Quilboars. Don't get baited by like all the Quilboars on tier 3 and below. Those are not really direction. They're good stats, they're good tempo, like Bristleback Brute and Banner Boar and Divine Shield guy on tier 2. They're fine cards to have, or even Jam Splitter. Good Quilboars, but that doesn't mean you're going Quilboars at all. These cards fit perfectly onto a Menagerie board, or just be strong early on, because you can even get rid of all the gems using a Necrolite. So generally speaking, your main direction for Quilboars is going to be the 5-drop Agam to allow you to like double the stats of your gems, and then you could like consider going more with gems because you get way more stats and scaling out of that. Bonker and Dynamic Duo, same deal. They're not direction enough. They are only good if you're leaning into Quilboars and you find the tier 5 or tier 6 stuff that provides you enough gems to actually just full pursue it. And I'm talking about Chargla and Flatus, the 2 tier 6 giants that provide you probably the most gems to be able to actually go full Quilboar and succeed with the build. Chargla plays gems on your entire board, and Flatus just automatically generates you gems for spending gold. So those cards, if you hit those and you're already leaning into Quilboars, you can just go full Quilboar. But if I find a Chargla or a Flatus, I don't think I'm gonna full go Quilboars because it's just not good right now. It's just gonna give you some stats on the board while you're looking for different things. You can buff up Divine Shields and things like that. Ground Shaker on tier 4 I didn't mention, but it's more of a tempo-ish card, but it could be a build on its own. Ground Shaker doesn't really enable Quilboars, it enables more of a tempo Divine Shield comp. If you have some sort of gem generation, you could put a couple gems every round onto Ground Shaker. You're going to be really strong, and you're just a Ground Shaker comp, which is a thing in its own. I don't just find Ground Shaker and force it, but if you're weak or if you have Divine Shields or already some sort of gem generation, then Ground Shaker could be direction enough to just pivot into that tempo comp. That was it for direction for every tribe. Now I'm going to mention a couple of cards that are interesting but don't really fit in one single composition. Like Champion of Yeshuraj was good for a while to play Taunt comp. Taunt comp is now horrible, but maybe you're watching this video in the future and Taunt comp is revived and back. So Champion of Yeshuraj could help you scale up a mid-game tempo board. Argus also enables Taunt comp to just whatever cards you have, turn them into taunts and have synergy suddenly with Champion or Arm on tier 3, which is like arguably also then some sort of direction. Also gonna mention Witchwing Nest Matron, which is a card that just gives you a lot of gold triples. So if you find this early, you very often transition a little bit into a Witching comp, which basically is just a bunch of reborn and small dudes to get as much value as possible from this card, and then you pivot into whatever the hell you get out of it. Like maybe it gives you triples into other direction, then you pivot, or it gives you a lot of tempo, or just straight up gives you direction. So this card can basically discover you some other sort of direction to pivot into, so you pivot into this card. So it's some sort of direction on its own. I hope that makes sense. Also, I didn't mention Agam Thorn Curse when I was talking about Quilboars, because you don't really play this card with Quilboars. It's a Menagerie card, so you play this to buff up multiple units on the board. Again, Agam isn't direction enough. You need to already have existing gem generation to buff up your board, or to buff up Agam that buffs up your board. But Menagerie is not in a good spot there right now. Again, if you're watching this video later and maybe Menagerie just got back into the game, then Agam is maybe a lot better. Baron, same deal. It doesn't enable anything. Like a Baron is just a 1/7, but if you have Death Rattle Mechs or Beast stuff or whatever, Baron could help you spike your composition into the next level. Same with Bran. Bran, again, I mentioned mainly with Murlocs, but it could fit in any comp really. Like you can just double your buffs no matter what you're playing with Bran, or find Amalgadons and fit those on your board. Lightfang, again, is Menagerie direction, so if you want to go Menagerie, find Lightfang, go for it. But again, Menagerie is not in a good spot right now, although if you have an amazing setup, I would still take it and probably try and pursue it. That's about it. This video was a lot longer than I expected, but I hope I went in detail enough so you guys are now ready to kick some ass on Battlegrounds. You now understand how you or when you go with different builds, because again, that is a very important skill to have, and a question I get very often, that people just force compositions and die, or just find direction but don't want to go with it. Hope you have a good day, and I'll see you in the next one.